On this episode of Money and Tech, Charlie Shrem's arrest, Bitcoin in space, Russian banks get tough, the New York virtual currency hearings, Tiger Direct takes Bitcoin, and we talk to Chris Larsen about Ripple. Hello, I'm Jared Kenna, and you're watching Money and Tech. This being our first episode, I'll give you a little background on who I am and what we'll be bringing to you on a regular basis. I've been following Bitcoin since the beginning in 2009. I started the first Bitcoin exchange in the United States, and I've witnessed firsthand all the ups and downs. Money and Tech is a hub for the latest financial tech news. Every week we'll be featuring a different guest, from industry leaders and experts to innovators in the digital currency space. This episode we'll be speaking with Chris Larsen, founder of Ripple Labs, the company behind Ripple. Ripple is a distributed payment system that is both very similar and yet very different than Bitcoin. Before we speak with Chris, here's what happened this week in Money and Tech. Amendments introduced in the Russian parliament caused a stir in the Bitcoin community. Russian regulators are, of course, keeping a close eye on digital currencies, as is the rest of the world. The Russian central bank stated on Monday that virtual currencies are illegal under Russian banking law, and users may become involved in illegal activity, including money laundering and financing terrorism. Meanwhile, German Gref, the CEO of Sberbank, Russia's largest bank, urged regulators not to restrict anonymous online payment systems. Gref was Russia's economy minister for 2 terms under Vladimir Putin. At the World Economic Forum, Gref was quoted saying that virtual currencies are a very interesting global experiment that breaks the paradigm of currency issuance, and to ban their issue would be a colossal step backwards. Clearly, Russia is divided on the digital currencies, and the future is yet to be determined. Bitcoin is going to the moon, but to be more precise, you can now buy a ride on Virgin Galactic with Bitcoin. At least 6 tickets have been purchased so far with the digital currency since Richard Branson's announcement. Tiger Direct took the Bitcoin plunge and now allows you to check out via BitPay. This makes Tiger Direct the second major online retailer to accept Bitcoin, right behind Overstock.com, which started accepting payments in Bitcoin earlier this month. The rush to accept Bitcoins has been obvious in many adult websites as well as some at Las Vegas casinos. On Tuesday, during a hearing put on by the New York Department of Financial Services, Benjamin Losky, New York's Superintendent of Financial Services, stated that during the course of 2014, they will put forward a proposed regulatory framework for virtual currency firms operating in New York. The New York DFS is evaluating whether they should issue a BIT license to companies dealing in digital currencies. The hearing also heard testimony from Fred Wilson of Union Square Ventures, Jeremy Liu of Lightspeed Ventures, a Silicon Valley-based VC firm active in the Bitcoin space, and Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss. Finally, Charlie Shrem, a high-profile member of the Bitcoin community, CEO of BitInstant, the New York Bitcoin exchange that received an investment from Winklevoss Capital, and vice chairman of the Bitcoin Foundation, was arrested Monday as he landed in JFK. Shrem has been charged with conspiracy to commit money laundering and unlawful money transmission in connection with the Silk Road. Allegedly, Shrem sold over $1 million worth of Bitcoin to Silk Road users. He is currently out on bail awaiting trial. On a personal note, this arrest comes as a huge surprise. I've been friends with Charlie for several years and find it hard to believe that he was involved with the Silk Road in any capacity. We will be following this very closely. We'll be right back with our interview with Chris Larsen of Ripple, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Money and Tech. We're here with Chris Larsen, CEO of Ripple Labs. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thanks for having us.
So, Chris, tell us a little bit about Ripple. It's similar to Bitcoin in some ways. It improves on Bitcoin in other ways. Could you kind of just give us a basic overview?
Sure. So there's sort of 2 things here. There's the Ripple protocol, and then there's Ripple Labs. So the Ripple protocol, like Bitcoin, is an open source protocol that anybody can use. You don't have to pay Ripple Labs a fee or license anything. It really is like a public good. We don't own it, we built it, but it has now been released to the world. And the protocol is really 3 things. So some ways similar to the Bitcoin protocol, some ways very different. The way we view this is, first and foremost, this should be a distributed payments protocol. That sort of comes first before the math-based currency. We think that's really what the world needs, this idea of an internet for value, which we can talk about. Second, it is a math-based currency. Like Bitcoin, math-based currency simply means a currency without a counterparty, which is a really unique thing in the world and plays a really, really unique and important role in building an internet for value. And then third, very differently from Bitcoin, because Ripple is value agnostic, you can put anything in there. You can put Bitcoins themselves in there, you can put airline miles, dollar, euro, yuan, real, anything can be in Ripple. It ends up being, we think, the world's first distributed currency exchange. So that's kind of the Ripple protocol, those 3 things. And then there's Ripple Labs, which in some ways is kind of like a red hat to Linux. We are a for-profit startup, But again, we don't own the protocol. We built the protocol. We're still the main contributors to the protocol, but we think that will change over time. We view our job as just sort of, husband through the development of this new network. And there's about 40 of us now, and we plan to really expand that aggressively so we can really build a fantastic protocol.
So at this point, Bitcoin has somewhat massive adoption for a startup currency. It's somewhat unprecedented, and it's the first time we've seen a system like this where you don't have to rely on a third party. So what inspired you to start Ripple, and what does it really bring that Bitcoin doesn't?
Yeah. So obviously we love the idea of Bitcoin. We think Bitcoin has been successful, very successful in what it was designed to do. It was designed to be a global currency without the ability to be debased. So again, a currency without a counterparty. And that's great. So it's a great store of value. We think it's a great instrument that now does not rely on a central bank. So kind of mission accomplished. But there's a lot of also talk about kind of where this technology can go as far as being an internet for value, sort of a payments protocol. And what that really means is now for the first time, can you architect the exchange of value like we've been exchanging information? Kind of our view of the world is already connected through an information web. That's great. The last 20 years, that's what the world has figured out how to do. But when it comes to value exchange, that's really still pre-internet until now. Until this double spend problem that Bitcoin was the first to solve was kind of figured out, you really could not have the exchange of value work like the exchange of information. And that's a huge cost to the world. So that if you can now have a value exchange, value web that works like our information web, layer that on top of the information web, you flatten finance, you tremendously save costs globally, but more importantly, you raise the amount of commerce that can happen. So many parts of the world, Africa and China and South America, that have access to the internet, the information web, but no ability to act on that information through like a value web. And that's what we set out to do. So that's different than what Bitcoin set out to do. We set out explicitly to build an internet for value. So we think most people will use Ripple using dollars, euro, yen, the existing things of value that they're comfortable with. And Ripple, our currency, really plays more of a supporting role. So you can completely ignore it, or you can use it directly. The important thing is the value web plays the starring role, the math-based currency plays the supporting role. We think that's kind of the opposite of Bitcoin.
For sure. So you mentioned China and Africa. So in places like this, a lot of times you have people that are exchanging value over older technology, cell phones, SMS, and things like that. So will it be possible to do that with Ripple as well?
Yes, so Ripple is really a foundational protocol, not really even the platform or a network. Those are kind of second level implementations. Others can build those platforms, those networks on top of the Ripple protocol, just like you can with the Bitcoin protocol. So these are what we think what's cool here is they're really foundational. They really are HTTP for money or SMTP for money. We like that idea. So what these technologies do really well is they actually start federating all of these other dispersed pre-internet systems all around the world. So that like M-Pesa in Kenya, which runs on feature phones, now can get integrated to the ACH system in the US and to the SEPA system in Europe. And you can now integrate these things instantly. So what this brings to the table is instant settlement at virtually no cost, and it's accessible to anybody that has internet access. And really bringing all these various systems together, just like the internet brought together pre-internet communication systems. It used to be so expensive to make a phone call internationally. You have to line up in front of some office somewhere and pay a fortune. And now we take it for granted that information just travels freely everywhere. That's where value exchange is going over the next decade because of these breakout technologies like Bitcoin and like Ripple.
And I would assume that Ripple would allow you to have more liquidity in these currencies. So by using XRP, the currency behind Ripple, you could trade my airline miles, which aren't extremely liquid, for dollars in Kenya.
So the thing about what XRP, the role that it plays, this supporting role, Ripple doesn't require you to ever use XRP, even in a trade. I mean, the cool thing here is that anybody in the world now using Ripple can put a bid ask on anything of value from any issuer. So for example, somebody can decide, I'm going to make a market between United Airline miles, if once United Airline miles are on Ripple, I hope they will be someday, to Brazilian real. You could go directly. You don't actually have to go through XRP. But what we believe will happen is that most market makers, in filling out the world of exchanging value from anything of value, again, currencies, merchant reward points, airline miles, gold, silver, anything that you define as value, most people will actually, most market makers will use XRP. Because as a currency without a counterparty, it is a completely unique thing in the protocol, just like Bitcoin is completely unique. So again, our view of why math-based currencies are so valuable isn't necessarily that they replace existing currencies, it's just that they have a very unique feature in that they have no counterparty. So the whole world, the world only has to think about one thing when it comes to Bitcoin or Ripple, is the price in any microsecond in time. You never have to think about the counterparty risks. It turns out that that is a completely unique thing that's never existed before. So why is that important? Let's say we use the example of a farmer in Nepal wanting to buy farming equipment from a supplier in Kenya, let's say. If you didn't have the math-based currency, even in an internet for value, you'd probably have to go Nepalese rupee to Indian rupee to British pounds to Kenyan shilling. That's a lot of hops.
Right, and you're going to lose a good amount of money on each hop.
You lose value on every hop, right? Because you're involving currencies with counterparties, things of value with counterparty. It'd be much better to go Nepalese rupee to XRP through a market maker, and then there's some other market maker that has made a market between Kenyan shilling and XRP. Now, Nepal and Kenya are one hop away. You're actually one hop away from airline miles, and everything is one hop away. That's why a math-based currency, we think, is really unique and really has value.
Excellent. So what are your greatest issues and concerns with growing Ripple and adoption?
There's a lot of things to think about in building these things. Obviously there's the technology piece, the trust in the code, the trust in the stability, always being up and always being in a distributed peer-to-peer system. So getting all those things right is really hard. Second is sort of the utility. Where can you use it? How do I bring dollars or real or Chinese yuan onto these platforms so you can buy whatever? That involves all kinds of regulatory issues, as we all know about. And then third is sort of the liquidity. Do you have enough market makers? Which again, the cool thing about these protocols is it can be anybody in the world. It could be somebody who's a student in the middle of inland China, or it can be the largest high-frequency trading company on Wall Street. That's a cool thing, but we have to make sure that you get enough market makers in all these key currency pairs. So those are the kind of things we think about all the time: trust, utility, and liquidity. And then, of course, the other big thing going on here is reputational risk. I think that's where the industry is right now. You're seeing all these incumbents. Everybody's thinking about Bitcoin, math-based currencies, Ripple. They're all super intrigued. We meet with people like every day at the highest level. Where you are now is this fear of reputational risk of getting involved with these protocols. If a big bank gets involved, will they get this firestorm from their regulators? So that's what's holding everybody back. So that's really what we all have to work on collectively. How do you get law enforcement comfortable, and therefore then the banks are comfortable, and then that reputational risk is taken off the table, they see the value, and that's when you really start getting these things exploding.
So what does 2014 look like, and how do you see all the other altcoins and the competition between Bitcoin and Ripple and everything panning out?
So what we really want to focus on now is building an amazing team. So we're up to about 40 now, and we're aggressively recruiting for cryptographers and developers. We think this is all really about getting incredibly talented technology folks, business development folks, product folks, building stuff that's super valuable. So that's job number one, and that's what we funnel all of the, we've created a lot of value in XRP, which we're able to monetize. The one thing that's really unique here about these Ripple, Bitcoin is these are really the first protocols that actually have monetization built right in. It's kind of never been anything like that. If you look at Twitter, Twitter has had to be a platform because it was the only way you can monetize it. The really cool thing is you have a built-in mechanism. And what we're trying to do is use the value that we're being able to monetize already to pump that right back into the protocol. So that's kind of job number one. Then again, it's also working on the reputational risk in 2014. As far as the other altcoins, it's great. What is go on here, I think, is an explosion of things of value. Because if you can really have an internet for value, like Ripple, and that's what we're aiming to do. It's currency agnostic, value agnostic. That actually makes it easier for all these new things of value to flow freely, so that you could take a new altcoin and send it to a merchant in Japan. It shows up as yen almost magically because there's some market maker who's interested in making a market. So whatever the world is willing to value as a new thing of value because it has this feature or that feature, that's great. And I think Ripple really helps grease the wheels for that.
Excellent. So how did you come up with the idea for Ripple, and how did it get started?
So the inventor of Ripple was Jed McCaleb, who, thank you for introducing us. Way back in the day when all these things seemed crazy, but absolutely genius programmer. Built eDonkey file sharing program. Was the founded Mt. Gox, and I think what he saw was that Bitcoin was super awesome, but what he didn't like about it was some of the how much electricity it used in its confirmation method. And again, what the real innovation here is all about is confirmation without a central operator, without a central clearinghouse. That's really the big technological breakthrough. And what he set out to do is simply build a method of confirmation that didn't burn a lot of electricity or computing power. And we call that the consensus method. So it's kind of as simple as that, but that brought consensus as a method of confirmation brought a couple of different improvements. One, it's faster. So the Ripple network confirms in about 5 to 10 seconds versus about 8 minutes now in Bitcoin. It doesn't burn a lot of electricity, which is sort of a hidden cost in the system. So we think that's a good thing. And then also it's a system that is, again, currency agnostic. So it is, again, kind of a protocol for all things of value that happens to be supported by a math-based currency, Ripple XRP, as the supporting feature in that system.
Okay. So Chris, how do you plan on distributing Ripple? I know part of it is set aside for the founders, and then the rest is given out to basically encourage people to use Ripple, or?
Yeah, so we have a different, obviously because we have a different confirmation method, consensus, what we don't have the requirement to have to reimburse validators, transaction validators with new XRP. Obviously in Bitcoin, because of the electricity and the computing power, the protocol has to reimburse validators with new Bitcoin. That's why there is the mining method in Bitcoin. You sort of have to have it that way. In Ripple, you don't have to have it that way. So we could have chosen to have a mining system, but our belief is it would be better to actually funnel that money back into Ripple Labs, keep Ripple Labs well funded, so we can keep hiring incredible cryptographers and engineers that can, increasingly improve the protocol. That's actually good for everybody. And then the second part is, since we don't have to distribute it to validators, Ripple Labs can give it to business development partners, to consumers broadly, to people globally. So two things that we've been doing which we like is we've been incenting market makers with XRP forgivable loans. It's essentially the vehicle that we're currently using. But we feel that incents, say, big currency traders, high-frequency traders to actually be active market makers on Ripple. That provides liquid markets. That's good for everybody, gives them an incentive in the long-term success of the network. In some ways, just exactly what Visa did, is they sort of gave out ownership of Visa to key banks to participate in the system. We think that's good. And the other cool thing that we've been doing that we like, we've been distributing XRP to consumers through a partnership that we have, sponsorship with the World Community Grid. World Community Grid is a really neat project. It's sponsored by IBM. It's a .org that basically tries to get the world to contribute their spare computing power globally in a shared supercomputer that then works on social problems like AIDS research, cancer research, building better wind generators and solar panels. And it's a huge effort. It's been going on for about 10 years. Since November, what we've been doing is that if you contribute your computer, which can be an Android phone, it can be your PC, to the World Community Grid, for every the computing minutes that you provide, we will give you XRP. And it's been super successful. Ripple Labs now is more than half of the entire project, and the project has like 100,000 teams. So the Ripple Labs team now, we've contributed about 13,000 years of computing power in just 2 months. We're about 7 times what IBM is contributing every day. So it's really been incredible, and most of that's been in China, actually. So it's things like that we think then help distribute XRP, actually are going to solving good problems that the world has, and are helping grow the network as well. So I think those are all good things for the Ripple protocol.
So Chris, how do you see the Ripple ecosystem growing, and where are people needed most? You need the gateways or users?
Yeah, so kind of the 3 core things that you need in any kind of payments network. We need the gateways to bring on things of value globally. So that you can somebody in Europe can easily get their euros onto the platform, and then use that to buy Bitcoin, or use that to buy yen or whatever. You need them in China, you need them in South America. So we're working on that actively. We have a very strong business development program globally for gateways, making good progress there. Second are the market makers. So we have a head of trading and markets based in New York, ex-Goldman Sachs guy, Phil Rappaport, fantastic at bringing on and understanding what these market makers need. So bringing those key players on to make markets. And then, of course, you need the merchants, ways of using Ripple. And our view there, it's not just convincing merchants one at a time, but as a protocol, our job is really to build bridges. So for example, we have a Bitcoin bridge. So anywhere Bitcoin is accepted today, anything of value on Ripple is accepted. So whether it be XRP, or soon we'll have gold balances, so you basically send gold to a Bitcoin address. So that's an important way of kind of in one fell swoop getting any merchant that accepts Bitcoin. Doing that in similar ways, bridging to other networks, and you can imagine what those might be. So we're actively working on those bridges to literally bring millions of merchants in one fell swoop onto the protocol. And then, of course, getting as many consumers as we can onto the protocol, which isn't necessarily directly giving to them, although like the World Community Grid, we like that, but it's also bringing on incumbents. So if you could bring on a big bank that has a couple million customers, what's neat about Ripple is those customers may not ever know they're using Ripple. All they know is that suddenly on their bank there's some withdrawal method that allows the bank customer to send money to India, that clears in 5 seconds for free. So they're using the Ripple protocol, but they don't necessarily even have to know it. We call that hosted wallets. So again, all we're concerned about is trust, utility, and liquidity. Grow the network. That actually will be the best thing for the value of XRP, and the best thing for the entire protocol.
So I think the biggest criticism I've heard of Ripple is that why should I trust it if it's not decentralized, if it's centrally controlled? And I understand the protocol is decentralized and all that, but Ripple Labs, correct me if I'm wrong, controls the disbursement of the Ripple and could potentially modify the money supply and things like that.
So it's a great question. Probably a key things to, I think there's sometimes misunderstandings about how it works. So just like Bitcoin, Ripple Labs, the founders, we can never create any more XRP. That's set. It was set at 100 billion about a year and 2 months ago now in the ledger. And that is decided by the protocol just like it is in Bitcoin. So XRP, our math-based currency, just like Bitcoin, is a currency without a counterparty. There is nobody to debase it, cannot be debased. Deflationary. Now Ripple Labs, because we don't have the need to reimburse validators, started off with the biggest chunk of XRP. And one of our key roles is making sure that we distribute it as broadly in a way that adds as much utility and liquidity as we possibly can. I think our incentives are very well aligned, that for Ripple Labs to do well, we have to do a very good job in protecting the value of XRP and the value of the network. And that really is the guiding principle here. In our distribution of XRP, which is kind of a short-term thing, I mean, that will run its course. It's kind of the initial distribution. The objective is how do you bring as many market makers, gateways, marketplaces, bridges, incent partners, bring as many consumers as you possibly can, hosted wallets as you can. And we think that's actually a really great tool that Ripple Labs has to add value. For those that are skeptical, I would just say it's a different approach. Give us time. Hopefully we'll earn their trust over time that we're we're doing this in a way that adds the most value to the protocol. At the end of the day, that's all that matters. And we're constantly learning. We're constantly trying to maximize how we do that. But we think it's actually could be a real strength in making sure that things are being done to just add as much, kind of partnerships and value as we possibly can to the protocol.
So Chris, if somebody wants to learn more about the World Community Grid, where should they go?
So they can go to computingforgood.org, and that's sort of the sign-up page that will link your World Community Grid to your Ripple wallet, and you can earn XRP for donating your computing power to solving these problems like AIDS and cancer research and solar panel research.
Excellent. Thanks for coming on the show, Chris.
Thanks so much for having us.
For more information on the World Community Grid and Ripple, see the show notes on moneyandtech.com.